you're dealing with a country where 40% of the population is living in extreme poverty, where you've got 1 out of 6 children in the world who are out of school in this country, you cannot fix this problem without having a leadership that understands what development is. Where are we spending our money? What is the direction? Does the Nigerian state even consider development as its critical priority? I mean, forget the noise. Where are we spending our money? We spend more money on debt service, on fuel subsidy, on overheads, on the National Assembly than on education. We're spending less money on education and healthcare than countries like Ghana are spending. We're spending less money on R&D than countries like Kenya and Rwanda. Now, if we do not, as a nation, if we do not at the level of the leadership understand that development is about human beings, everything we do is going to fall by the wayside. So the biggest accelerator is political. It's having a political leadership that understands that the state should be a developmental state, not a rentier state, and not a populist state. We have pursued populist policies. We want to have cheap fuel, we want to have cheap electricity, we want to have a strong naira. That is populism. At the end of the day, what price are we paying out, by taking money out of education in order to subsidize petroleum products? What price are we paying by discouraging electricity from coming in by basically making people pay a price that is not a cost recovery price? So the biggest accelerator I think we need is a mind change. It is understanding that this state needs to exist for those poor people Alero is talking about. Whoever is sitting in Abuja and in the government houses in the state must think of those people first and foremost. And it's when you think of those people that you make the right investments in education, the right investments in healthcare, the right investments in opportunities for them to lift themselves out of poverty. We can never have the SDGs if we don't do that. I mean, 2020, the ranking came out. Nigeria was ranked 160th out of 166 countries. It's disgraceful. Yes, you talked about giant of Africa or lion of Africa. And as I said in Kaduna, we're just a giant with clay feet. We had a mark of what, 48.9%, and you had Algeria, which is the highest in Africa, with a mark of 70.86%, ranked 66th in the world. Other African countries are doing this. So the reality is, at the level of the state, we have to decide what is the priority. Now, certainly there will be costs, but economics is about choice. Where are we going to take resources out and where are we going to put resources in? So long as our spending sends the wrong signals, so long as the bulk of our resources are going to the wrong areas, we are not going to meet the SDGs. And I think for the last 20 years, 30 years, I'm not talking about last 6 years, for the last 20, 30 years, we have turned the state into a populist rentier state where the focus has not been on the people. And we've got to start interrogating those policies and that approach. So the greatest accelerator for me is to build that national consensus. And that consciousness has to build from the very top. I'm glad Fayemi is here. The governors have to agree. The presidency has to agree. The legislature has to agree that this country is going to be a country that focuses on education, focuses on healthcare, focuses on human capital development. And yes, we've got to deal with some things, but that is absolutely necessary. Until we do that, frankly, we can have these small attempts. And remember that SDG is not just about economics. Look at the social issues. We talk about gender equality. And I ask the question, we have 36 ministers in Nigeria. How many are women? We have 109 senators. How many are women? We have 360 members of the House of Reps. How many are women? We talk about SDGs. We talk about gender equality. What are we doing to promote gender equality? We have to walk the talk. What does it take to say 1/3 of all legislative offices in this country are designated all-women offices? Every political party should put a woman there. And so that we know that we have at least 1/3 of our legislators are women. What does it take to say that at least 1/3 of our cabinet or 40% of our cabinet must be female? What does it take to do that? Why are we so focused, as I keep saying all the time, focused on ethnicity, on religion? That is the only diversity we're concerned about. You talk about sustainability at the social level. You talk about the environment, renewables. Where is the focus on that? So those are the kinds of issues. If we're really talking about SDGs, we need to understand what SDGs are. We need to say what is our position on these SDGs, how do we link our strategy to these positions, and how do we fund that? That should be reflected. So you have this direct connection and actual positive steps. Now then people like Alero, myself, other people in the private sector can then come in and know that they have a direction, and then there will be, the spillover effects of private sector complementing government policy. Those, I think, will be my brief opening remarks.
This is NESG, so we understand the importance of the private sector, but we also understand the importance of collaboration between the public and the private sector. Not everything public is bad, and not everything private is good. We need to look at ways to match different aspects of it. In terms of human capital development, which is focus that we've been asked to look at, there's no way we're going to get to that target without a focus on education and healthcare. Those are major drivers of human capital development. And sitting where I am, alongside my colleagues, clearly we're battling two major outcomes on the education side. The rate of out-of-school children, and then the quality of education itself. There is some improvement. It's still not where we want to be, but if you look at the statistics between 2015 and 2020, we've seen almost a 4 million rise in enrollment, from about 15 million to 19 million in primary school enrollment. And we've also seen retention rates, particularly amongst girls, increasing. Out of about 900,000 that we've seen, 700,000 are girls. So the gender dimension of it is being addressed, but not on the scale that we would like to see. And I think what groups like Teach for Nigeria are doing is very critical, but we need to look at a broader perspective of how to tackle these issues. And I see on the educational side, dealing with it both at my state level and also being aware of what my colleagues are doing all around the country, we need to look at a number of issues in terms of the quality of education. Number one is learning environment. The proximity of our kids to school that they attend and the quality of the infrastructure of the school. The second is teacher quality itself and pedagogy. Again, some work is being done by many schools in this regard. You have programs like BESTA, Edo Best, that are addressing this. And then you have programs like we have in Ekiti addressing incentives. So we have core teachers allowance, so the core subject allowance and rural teachers allowance, because naturally teachers want to stay mostly in the city. So you need to find a way to get other children that are not in the city the opportunities that those who are in the cities have, beyond just declaring free education on a general scale. So you need to address teacher quality, you need to address pedagogy. You need to address the management of the school and funding. We all talk about UBEC, but governors have made a point about UBEC consistently that the approach of counterpart funding is a problem to access to education for our children. Rather than focus on counterpart funding, which then leaves many states that don't have the resources to meet the counterpart, to just leave it. When I came back as governor in Ekiti State, I had to look for 7 billion naira to clear the backlog of counterpart funding in order to have access to funds to rebuild schools, to improve teacher quality, and a number of other aspects of that. So governors have insisted that, look, what you need to be looking at is a program for results approach rather than a counterpart funding approach. Agree the outcomes up front, and then get the money and monitor the extent to which you're meeting those outcomes. So funding is going to be critical to it. And finally, management of the school would be a critical component, and then instructional materials that the students have access to.
Now I'm going to take it at the profiling. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
The money.
So you understand that right now you are the voice of the government here, so I need you to tell us.
The Secretariat of the Nigerian Governors Forum is a vehicle for that. For example, June last year, the Nigerian governors collectively declared a state of emergency on gender-based violence. Yes. At the time we did that, there were only 14 states that were signed up to the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act. Today, 30 states have signed up.
Sir, that was absolutely incredible. And please, let's put our hands together and just appreciate that. So who is not communicating what is happening at the Secretariat to us properly and effectively?
Well, we have to deal with a major challenge of Nigerians generally having a trust deficit in those who are in charge. And those who are in charge are partly responsible for that as well. The challenge is to agree a set of outcomes and let's jointly monitor it together. When you're putting people in office, hold their feet to fire. Hold them accountable to what you put them to office to do. Don't just dismiss them without finding out what they're doing on the ground about these issues.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
You governors, you people in government must understand that sometimes you have to do. No, let me make a point, please. He's my friend. Yes. I think it's a point, okay? That there are times when you take decisions that are unpopular, but you have to take them because they are right. If you keep doing the popular thing, you will continue to do the.
They don't have to be populist, but we have to take them because they are right.
The way governors have gone about it, you can politicize, you can talk anyhow about it. The way we've gone about it, policy-wise, is to insist that in all our states, every governor must make an effort to ensure that girls have free compulsory education right up to senior secondary school free. By the time you get to senior secondary school free, you are probably 18. But we should take stronger measures to address population.
So this measure that has been researched and is ready, and all it needs to do is to be domiciled, institutionalized.
Well, I've had His Royal Highness on that. I've just told you about one that we had relative success on, and only within the period of 18 months. We started the emergency on gender-based violence June 10, 2020. And this is October 2021. So I will find out from Governor Lalong. I would even get a copy of this code that His Highness produced and see how I can encourage my colleagues to look at it and send it to their various...
So, sir, can we take that as a take-home from this summit? That in terms of securing the future, that would be an action. It's an actionable commitment being made right now by the chairman of the Nigerian Governors Forum for all of the governors of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Do we have a yes? Do we have a yes? Do we have... No, I need a yes from him and then we can all echo. Do we have an aye? Do the ayes have it? Do the ayes have it?
Well, yes, if I want to be popular, I will say yes.
No, don't be popular. Do the right thing.
I want to do the right thing.
Yes, sir.
And the way to do the right thing is not to shave their heads in their absence. I will collect the code and take it to the chairman of Northern Governors Forum and encourage him to get it discussed at their own meeting. I can't speak for them.
Yes, sir.
I speak for Nigerian Governors Forum. I don't speak for Northern or Southern Governors Forum.
All
so
right.
don't...
Okay, so one last thing I just want to ask, and I'm not trying to be populist, I'm actually just trying to drive this because our agreement...
It's a serious issue.
Our agreement together...
It's a very serious
yes,
issue.
our agreement together for this platform was we were going to get up from this platform with, even if it's one actionable result that we would all commit to. What I want to ask is that in partnership with the NESG 27, can we set up an engagement?
We have a partnership.
No.
The Nigerian Governors Forum,
No, I mean,
we have a
on this
partnership with
subject matter.
NESG.
No, on this particular one, can we have a side event, literally, that will bring us in for a conversation, probably even with the technical representatives?
It's not a problem. We do that with NESG all the time. The chairman is there.
All right, Chairman, sir, so you are going to have the side event, and we can all connect to that. And the outcome of that now becomes something that, in furtherance, driving this becomes the tool, reference, profile from this particular platform discussing and conversating around the accelerator that will bring about next year's change. Because if you did the girl child, against gender violence last year, we're ready for a new thing.
We are working constantly on girl child education.
Your Excellency, thank you. Thank you very much.
I don't think we'd ever get to a point where we would have enough budget on all fronts for education. But when people calculate education budget, they often restrict it to just the federal education budget. When they're doing this percentage calculation of 15%, 10%, it is only the 1.2 trillion. Education is number 2. Madam Minister is here now. After security, when I looked at the current budget before the National Assembly, education is actually number 2. And it's still not great, but it's not what it used to be. Education used to be about 400 billion, and I think they have about 900 billion, or even almost, if you add hedge fund and add other things, almost 1.2 trillion. That's still not a lot in a budget of 16 trillion. But the bottom line is that we need a much more serious injection of funds. 16 trillion in dollar terms is probably 40 billion. That is not up to agri budget in Brazil.
How?
Well, we have to work with you in private sector.
But how will private sector work with you when we are being pushed?
No, we have to work with you in private sector. We also have to do something that Israel Highness mentioned. We need to free up funds from these incentives and subsidies that only benefit the elite, like PMS.
Thank you.
And then direct it to education and much more specific areas that can be measured.
I think the critical thing becomes the political will for us to be able to achieve this. And, looking at the NESG policy commissions and community of practice, I'd like to say we move from 1, 2, 3 to 4.
Well, there's a sense in which I think we even over-exaggerate this SDG. We've had SDGs in this country for the last 50 years. When you look at the 4 cardinal points of the Unity Party of Nigeria, it is SDG. Free education, free health care, full employment, rural integration, integrated development. It is SDG. And what you can't measure, you cannot manage. So we must find a framework, just as the SDG platform, to measure precisely how we're doing on all these areas of interest. I think for us in Nigeria, the most critical of the SDGs is security, it's education, it's healthcare. We can wrap around a lot of the other 17 points, 17 SDGs around those 3. And if we succeed on those 3, we will succeed in the remaining 14.
Now we've got to deal with these issues of the government providing what it's supposed to provide for. Often we think it's a demand question. It's also a supply question. The schools are not there. But also the governors have not agreed to think outside the box. We still think of schools as going to build brick and mortar schools. Okay, and I've been saying over and over again, if you have a village and you have a mosque or a church, you have a school. If you have the house of a village head, you have a school. You don't have to wait until you have a budget to build a school. They can go to the church, they can go to the mosque, they can go to the palace of the village head, community hall, and that is a school. Okay? If we use technology, we can deliver education. And third thing is, when you look at the curriculum, in many places, children fail because the teachers don't speak good English, and the children don't have good English. They're spending so much time trying to learn English before they learn mathematics or they learn biology. We can increase the number of years that we teach in indigenous languages for those who cannot have access to English. So we've got to think of how to close these distances. And if we don't do these things holistically, we're not going to get the kind of accelerated outcomes that we want. Okay, so I think it's important to listen between the lines to what Governor Fayemi is saying, which is that you can have a law, for example, if we say child rights, if we say a father is responsible for taking care of his child, but then when we see children on the streets, nothing happens to the fathers are going to continue producing children and leave them on the streets as beggars. So how about the enforcement processes for these laws? So so for example, this code that we have, I know you're putting the government under pressure to pass, and we should pass the law, but we must understand that the law is just one element out of a whole network of an ecosystem that needs to be put in place. The police, the judiciary, the alcaldes. Okay? If a man beats his wife and she comes to the judge still has to take the actions that will make sure that other men do not beat their wives based on the law for that to happen. Otherwise, the law is just a paper tiger. So these are the kinds of things that we need to look at. Now, on the question of you see, a lot of these things have to do with the lack of will to communicate very difficult and painful decisions. But also, we shoot ourselves in the foot. I want to talk about transparency. I've said this over and over again, and when I say this, I want it to be clear that I've been saying this. I said this when I was governor of Central Bank under the previous government. So what I say is not about a particular government. Now take petroleum subsidies. In 2015 or 2016, Minister Kachuku came out. If you can Google it. He came out and said Nigeria was importing 30 million liters of fuel a day after eliminating corruption and having transparency. You can Google it. It's simple. You can Google, if you Google Kachuku daily fuel consumption, he will tell you fuel imports to Nigeria were 30 million liters. In 2019, NNPC came and said we're importing 59 million liters a day after oil prices have gone up. And I've been asking the question, what happened between 2015 and 2019 that our consumption doubled? This was the same that happened under the previous government. When oil price goes up, unlike all other products, where if it gets more expensive, you have a reduction in demand. In Nigeria, when the price of oil goes up, NNPC says we're importing more. Why? Because as the price of oil goes up, the arbitrage between the subsidized price and the market price is so high, there is an incentive to inflate those numbers. And I have produced evidence before the National Assembly, historically, of cases where NNPC would say we have imported fuel, give the name of a vessel, you go and check. His committee also checked that. People say they imported fuel. You go and check, and the vessel was nowhere near Nigeria on the day they said it was in Lagos. Some of the vessels had even been retired. And people have collected subsidy on those things. So why, for me, all the drawbacks of this regime, what is costing Nigeria is not just the cost of the subsidy, it's the cost of the corruption. The best solution is just to scrap it. Now, but you ask about accountability. Let's start from the basic premise. This money coming from petrol belongs to the Federation account. The federal government does not have the constitutional right to pay subsidy on behalf of the Federation. So there's a fundamental constitutional issue. Because this is money that should go to the federal, state, and local governments. Yet, money belonging to the Federation is carried out as federal government expenditure. So you've got so many complex issues. There are legal issues, there are economic issues. What we need to do is stop these things. So when you stop, because we talk about not having resources, the reason we don't have money is that the money we have is going to other areas. The Minister of Finance is there. You can ask her how many billions of naira is being spent every year subsidizing electricity tariffs. Why is it that people in Abidjan are paying cost recovery tariffs? People in Niger, people in Burkina Faso. Why is it that these countries that are on paper poorer than Nigeria are paying cost recovery tariffs and getting regular electricity, and we in Nigeria cannot pay cost recovery tariffs? Because we see electricity just as consumption. If you go to a village, and we have seen it with these offline, off-grid solutions, you go to villages, people are paying right price for electricity, and they have 24% electricity, and they are using it to earn an income and live themselves out of poverty. Electricity is a necessary input for poverty alleviation. It is the availability that is important, more important than the cost. If you produce electricity at a high price and it's available 24/7, the poor people of this country will take it and become mechanics, electricians, vulcanizers, carpenters, artisans, and they will make enough money to pay the tariff and also leave their people out of poverty. So it is about understanding the difference between price elasticity and income elasticity, understanding that we're making choices and that these choices should be based on a well-thought-out, well-articulated scale of preference. What is it that has the highest impact on SDGs? And sometimes we take these decisions because on the face of it, they look popular, and the people themselves don't understand. We need to take those decisions and explain them. So I think getting that right at the federal level, and then getting it down to the state level. And the states, I mean, take Kaduna State. The governor retrenched workers. People were unhappy, but look, he realized he cannot continue spending all his money paying salaries. If he pays salaries, he's not going to provide education and healthcare. Now, he took difficult decisions that were unpopular. But frankly, these are decisions that should be taken by every state governor, the decisions that should have been taken at the federal level in 2015 and 2016, when the government was extremely popular to cut down the cost of governance and free up resources for development. Now, that has not been done. Can it be done now? I don't think so. I don't think that in a year before elections, the federal government will do it. I think this is something that this government should have done in 2015 and 2016. Okay, now, so it's not, I want to be very honest and very frank. I don't think we're going to see major structural decisions that are going to inflict pain, which is necessary for reform between now and the elections. We have to think beyond 2023. What kind of leadership are you going to have that will be able to take those decisions? And whoever comes in is going to take difficult decisions that will be very unpopular, but those decisions have to be taken in order to reset this economy on the path of long-term development.
Thank you so much, Your Royal Highness. Please, a round of applause.
You also must not exaggerate the importance of the elites are important, but don't also let's suffer from the tyranny of meritocracy, because we have that in this country as well. Yeah. The general populace should have a stake in whoever becomes. Well,
the general populace too should get to engage the political processes and all of the opportunity of 2023 campaigning.